Welcome first-time listeners and returners to the Sports Deli, where everyone deserves a seat at the table. What about fucking Colin? Why does he not have a fucking job? Because he's still being whiteballed. Why is Tom not speaking out about that? He should be his biggest fucking ally. And he hasn't said one fucking thing. A lot of people that have come on this show, I don't know why, they've gotten some good fucking jobs afterwards. Jim Rome in the jungle. It's right here in the Sports Deli, baby. We got some good ass karma right here. Let's fucking go.
I love it.
Man.
I love it.
We hope you enjoy today's show, everyone.
All right, let's rock and roll. We're so honored on this second day of Black History Month to be joined by Associate Professor of Communication at Loyola Marymount University, author of The Black Athlete Revolt, The Sport Justice Movement in the Age of Black Lives Matter, Dr. Shaun Anderson. A recognized expert in the area of sports and social responsibility, Dr. Anderson has some other upcoming writings that we will also take a look at that have to do with sport and brand activism. And this includes, but is not limited to, athlete activism, sports and politics, as well as sports and community development. He teaches courses in race and culture in sport, communication, consulting, and sport in society. Fascinating stuff. He studies complex platforms of sports and social responsibility. He's founder of CSR Global Consulting. He's worked with Nike, ESPN, and Major League Baseball regarding social injustice initiatives. He was selected as the 2018 Black Enterprise Magazine Man of Distinction. He was born the same day as Arsenio Hall, RG3, Abraham Lincoln, interestingly enough, and the late, great Bill Russell. He was also born the same year as Carrie Underwood and Larry Fitzgerald. You can find him on Twitter at Shaun Mark Speaks. Now, Mark is M-A-R-Q at Shaun Mark Speaks, or on his website at Shaun Mark Anderson. Dr. Anderson, A Money.
Hey, Dr. Anderson sounds great. Hey, Money, that's a good one. I really like that. Shaun's fine. Well, you know what? To keep it, I guess, to where people can find me.
Right.
Let's just go with Dr. Anderson. We'll make that work.
Yeah, Dr. Anderson. Perfect. So there's a lot to your story and how you got here. And I also like your book, like to go most of the time in chronological order, because I think that gives people a framework to understand what motivated you, what inspired you, what representation you saw that allowed you to put the correct tools in your toolbox, to be able to pay that forward and continue to educate people with your platform. So can you talk about, now you grew up in Section 8 housing.
Yes, I did.
So tell everyone about what that experience was like and how that impacted you.
Yeah, so I grew up in rural Arkansas, the city, Pine Bluff, Arkansas, predominantly Black city, under 50,000 people, southeast part of Arkansas. Actually, I got into Section 8 when I was in junior high school. Prior to that, me, my mom, and my two older sisters were living with my grandparents in this old shotgun house they built back in the 40s.
Wow.
So you can imagine how this house is holding up in the 90s. As a 90s kid, right? And so, much like a lot of the people that I grew up with, we had aspirations to play pro football, right? It's the South, deep South,
right?
SEC country. There we go. And so I had the inevitable knee injury in high school that derailed those plans, but I still had an interest in sports. So just those formative years of growing up in a single parent home, poverty, being homeless from time to time. And
wow.
The interesting part about it is once we got to Section 8 housing, it became a little bit more stable for us because, the rent is only so much per month. My mom was a janitor, her entire life.
Wow.
And so we didn't have a lot. So that kind of made things stable the last few years before I graduated from high school. And so I still had this interest in sports, But now I needed to move to the next thing outside of the pro level. So I was like, well, I'm about to become the next Greg Stewart Scott, ESPN anchor, right? But then I, went to school, worked in the industry for a little bit, fell in love with the research. And I'm gonna got a graduate degree. Okay. And then the professor there was like, hey, you have an eye for research and an eye for creating knowledge. Why don't you go pursue a doctorate? And I was like, at first, man, no, I ain't trying to do that. I need to make some money. It's out of school, And actually what happened and what led me to go pursue a PhD was I accepted a job at a consulting firm in Dallas, Texas. Worked there for about a year. And then the '08 recession hit. And so all of the people were newly hired, lost their jobs. So I subsequently lost the job, went homeless again, stayed in the streets for about a year.
Wow.
And I finally moved back to my mom's house, swallowed my pride and went back home. And so for about a couple of months, I was just trying to figure it all out. Like, where am I going? What's happening? And so that same professor that was telling me to pursue a doctorate when I was getting my master's degree, I got it back in contact with that person. And it was like, are you going to listen to me now? And I was like, well, what else do I have to lose? So I applied and I got accepted into West Virginia University and I started there in 2013. And here's the funny part about that too. When it was time for me to leave Arkansas to go start school in West Virginia, I had only about $50 to my name. I had a pillow sham full of clothes and a pillow.
Wow.
And I got a Greyhound ticket and I moved to West Virginia. It took me 2 days to get there. And then from that point, I was there in West Virginia for 3 years, earning my doctorate. First semester was a struggle, naturally. But from that point to the time that I graduated 3 years later, I had started working my interest in sports and social change and society together to the point to where my dissertation was actually working with Major League Baseball on their diversity outreach initiatives issue. And so that ended up turning into some research. And at that point, I applied for, professor positions pretty much across the country. And I got the position here in Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount University in 2016. And that's where I've been ever since. And I earned tenure a couple of years ago.
Man,
And
congratulations.
so, I appreciate that. And so that's been the journey to get to this point. And since that time, I've been working on other research, other book chapters, other articles about this intersection. And it's an important one. The work that I did previously to this book is what led me to write the book in the first place. And again, that's how we got here.
Okay, so you just talked about 30 years.
Yeah.
In about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Trying to let that breathe for a second. So, and I appreciate it because I can go in a lot of different directions. But I want to ask you, what part of that 30 years do you want to touch on? Because I just want to dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you the things that came to mind. Obviously, the homelessness and your pride, because you did mention that was a part of it. An HBC versus a PWI.
Yeah.
And why you had a difficult time during your first semester at WVU. So which one of those do you think? Let me add a fourth one.
Okay.
Was music important to you growing up?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so there's those four things.
Okay.
Or any one or all or a couple of those things that the first thing you're like, oh man, I got to talk about that first.
So let me try to hit some of it and then you can dig further from that.
Yeah.
So to the music question, yes, my everybody in the home that I grew up in was significantly older than me. So my older sister was 16 years older than me. Wow. And the second one was 14 years. And here I am, the baby of the family. And so my mom was hooked on Motown.
Hello.
It's so big of Temptations, the Supremes. I heard this
Wow.
stuff all like Marvin Gaye.
Mm.
And you know, those, especially when we got to the late 60s and 70s, you know, Trouble Man, right? Marvin
Right.
Gaye.
Right.
All Confusion, Temptations, all these songs. So, you know, all of that was influence. My grandfather, who was only in my life my first 11 years, was an avid sports fan, was a baseball fan.
Wow.
And he would always tell me, hey, come look at Ozzie Smith, St. Louis Cardinals fan. Look at St. Louis, Ozzie Smith slipping. And, you know, I took willing to beat all of these players. And then, you know, in thinking about this book, it brought that attention to me even when I started working with the baseball stuff. That, hey, back then as a kid, we saw all these black players. Darryl Strawberry, you know, again,
Rod Carew.
Rod Carew, you know, and, you know, even coming up, his early parts, Barry Bonds, right?
Right.
90s. But they disappeared, essentially. You know, the interest left. What happened?
Went from 20% to less than 8% now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's still like that today. You know, even there was an argument about this last World Series, not having an African American player on either side. So there you go. So
African American manager, though.
Yeah, Dusty Baker. There we go.
Yeah.
And so I just started asking these questions. And so in going to West Virginia, the reason why it was a struggle, because there was about a 5-year gap in between me pursuing my master's degree and pursuing a doctorate. And West Virginia University had a really fast-paced PhD program, 3 years, whereas most doctoral programs are 4 or 5 years. So it's accelerated. And
but did you feel more comfortable culturally and just on the day-to-day at an HBC versus, was that a part of it, or were you just you were good, like, you know, you had a good support system and it wasn't that big?
No. The HBCU was very much a more relatable, of course, experience. Whereas PWI, and I actually was the only black person in my cohort. That was an experience because it was, if you couldn't keep up, then you're out. You know,
Did you have any black professors?
The only black professor I had, well, actually, he wasn't a professor, but he was on my dissertation committee, was the dean of the College of Physical Activity and Sports Sciences at West Virginia, who he just recently retired.
Wow.
His name is Dean Dana Brooks, the longest serving dean at that institution, and a champion on diversity in sports. You talking about prolific books and all that. And what's interesting about it is when I first arrived in West Virginia, he was the first person that I met and talked to of any of the faculty that were there. And he told me, flat out, you're going to have to be the Jackie Robinson of your program.
Wow.
And that stuck with me, you know what I'm saying? Because who am I relative to what Jackie Robinson had to say, right? But I took that to heart.
Wow.
During that entire experience. And so, it
do you know how many blacks have come after you there?
No, I'm the only one.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
In the last decade?
Yeah. Who have graduated with a doctorate? No one.
Yeah. Wow, man. I don't know how to feel about that. That's sort of sad, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm not going to lie to you. It was not a great experience.
Right.
I always say I learned how to be a professor there, but that's about it.
Because I asked this question a lot from NBA players that have been on the show and others, and their experience when it comes to systemic racism and obviously that kind of thing. So were there for whatever reason people of Eastern European ancestry, right, or whites that referenced you a certain kind of way, either out of jealousy or just because they felt like you were there only because of the color of your skin instead of the content of your character and because of your degree, your undergraduate degree?
I'm telling you, all of that. It actually took me a couple of years after I graduated to get over that process, because There was a lot of that. Oh, you're only here because you're Black. You're not smart enough. And see, here's the dilemma. You're in those predominantly white spaces, and you're trying to do the best that you can. You're not up to that level there. But then if you perceive something like that, and in many ways, some people from the Black community may say, oh man, you're moved to the other side. You're losing yourself. And so you sound like you're stuck, in this conundrum.
Let me stop you there for a second, because I think this is important, because part of what I really want for this show, for people that are listening that are in the white space, is to be educated about the mindset, about some of the nuances that white people cannot possibly understand.
Right.
So what I'm curious about, based on my experiences, based on what you just talked about, was, is there an escalation because of the accumulation and the generational things that happen to you from multiple people in the home, anything you witnessed in the home, the type of the type of house that you described that barely was standing, to the homelessness, to going from a historical Black college to a PWI. And so I don't think a lot of white people really truly understand that a lot of these issues still exist and will for a long time, because of some of those nuances that I just talked about, that are particularly applicable only to the Black and brown community.
Yeah.
And so people will say, get over it, right? We've heard that for
Mhm.
years. Or
Mhm.
you're pulling the race card. And from my experience, I can't imagine, just from the big umbrella perspective that everyone can relate to, walking out of your house as an African American or a person of color in the Black and brown community versus a white person. Whereas people in the Black and brown community have to look over their shoulder all the time, whether they're going into an establishment, driving down the road, or they're at a PWI.
Right.
So talk about what your mindset was like. And do you feel like you said you took a couple years to get over it, but were you easily triggered? Were you ready to fight? Were you like, I don't want to, necessarily cuss, because you're, college professor and everything, but
Oh, no, you're good.
yeah,
Do
but
people.
yeah, but when you reflected back on it, looking
Mhm.
back, obviously we can say that, wow, I learned so much from that experience, and it's made me a more rich, a person with so much more depth, and I have better tools in my toolbox now.
Yeah.
But at the time, talk about how fucked up it was. Let's just
Yeah.
call it what it was.
Yeah, for sure.
And shame on all those people. And hopefully they've reflected back and been like, damn, has anyone reached out to you to apologize?
I'm laughing because when I felt you about to ask that question, reminded me of a conference I just went to a few months ago. I'll get into that in a second.
Go ahead. I know I went in a lot of different directions,
Oh,
but
no.
I'm
You're
trying to
fine.
get your mindset in that
Yeah.
situation, because there's so many things to talk about. But
Yeah.
I think it's so important that people understand, if you really are trying to be educated, how a person in the Black and brown community, you in particular, thinks
Yeah.
when they're around a lot of white people,
It's
racist white people.
yeah. Yeah, no. A lot of the points you hit on were correct. So in the sense of saying there was this inner rage, I definitely wanted to fight a lot.
I wanted to fight for you.
Shit, man, I'm telling you, it took everything in me to stop shit out somebody. But
Real.
the thing is, it's the waking up with the mindset that they already don't want me here. I have to work 15 times harder just to prove myself in many ways. And then on the flip end, I'm the type of person that's very anti-play the game. I'm not trying to do that just to, for you to accept me. I'm not doing that at all.
You want to figure out how to channel it.
Yeah. And so it was, and this is true of academia, period. But for me, in my experience, academia is full of petty, full of ego. Everybody's trying to prove that they're the smartest person on the planet. And so again, when you're in a space that's like that, you're going to be doubly pounded upon as a Black person, because you don't want here. Just go somewhere and work in the industry. Don't try to sit here and be an intellectual. And so it was a lot of that. It was a lot of faculty who also pushed this agenda forward in many ways to pit students against each other. You know, it was a lot of that shit. A lot of, you know, you don't belong here. And that was the thing that you have to deal with, on top of the fact that you have to teach your courses for
Right.
200 students, keep the grades intact, write your research paper, study for your comprehensive exams. So it was a lot of anger, a lot
Sorry.
of me wanting to. I mean, there's some people that I don't talk to this day. There's faculty members from that institution who have deleted me from social media, even though they were the ones that were causing the issues, because I was speaking the truth about it, right? So to avoid it, they just delete me and then try to make up their own narrative. But here's the thing. So we have this conference called the National Communication Association Conference. We have them every year. And I haven't been there in about 3 or 4 years because I did not want to run into those people. Okay, but I had a paper accepted there and I presented it this past November. I ran into one of the faculty members who still works at an institution, just by chance going into the lobby of the hotel. And this faculty person was like, "Shaun, is that you?" I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, the first thing she said was, well, actually, she gave me this big hug and said, "I'm so sorry at how you were treated at this institution." And for a moment, I looked at her like for about 10 seconds because I didn't know how to take that, you know? And I
She's
said,
white.
"Well," she's white. And I said, "I appreciate it. Cool. But as long as they stay over there, we ain't gonna have no problems. Because if they come to me right now, I can't tell you how I'm gonna act." So, and she was like, "I was just so sorry. Can I stay in contact with you? You know,
Wow.
I know you were done so wrong." But again, they'll never admit it.
Yeah.
And it's just a situation now to where, again, it took me a couple of years to get over all of that anger. But now I'm in a place to say, again, as long as you don't bother me, I'm cool. That's it. I'm just doing my thing. And I probably won't have a relationship with them because they still probably see me as inferior. There were a few people who were envious because in doc school, you're not necessarily, you don't teach graduate level classes because, you know, you're just learning. But my teaching evaluations are so good that I was tasked with teaching the graduate level course because one student thought he should be teaching, one guy.
Oh boy.
And so he went all on social media talking about it's amateur hour. Why is this person teaching this? I'm the one that's the greatest type shit. And
Mm-mm.
he went on this whole campaign with all of the other students by saying, "Don't be friends with him. You know, he's just here because he's black type shit." And that pretty much ruined the last semester of my time there. And he and I, we haven't spoken since. And I'm quite sure if I run into him, he's going to avoid me like he avoids me every time we go to a conference. But that's all the stuff you got to deal with. And then that's just on top of getting up every day and handling your everyday life.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was the experience.
Well, flowers to you for how you handled it.
Appreciate it.
And I say this all the time that people don't really, that people, for people that don't understand. So let's take this scenario and you can just comment on it real quick and say, yeah, that's either spot on or you're way off base with that.
Okay.
So you, for example, are from Section 8 housing, you went to a historical black college, and I'm a, you know, typical white guy. And I went to Harvard.
Mhm.
And so we both apply for the same thing, similar scenario to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the people on these committees are white, unless you're at an HBC, or interviewing for a job, and they're going to look at Harvard and they're going to be like, well, of course we have to hire that person.
There
Now,
you go.
this is why the interview process is important, and to do a little digging when it comes to multiple candidates. So let's say, for example, and a lot of colleges do require an interview.
Right.
So let's say, for example, they interview you and they come to find out that you had no internet growing up. So you had to go to Taco Bell every day for 7 years just to get internet so you could do your homework. Half the time you were sitting outside in the cold. You had to look down all the time. Your neck was hurting. Or if you were in the restaurant, they'd throw you out half the time because they were like, you're not buying any food, get out. You're going to use our Wi-Fi.
Absolutely.
And so that type of scenario, to me, if I'm interviewing you, and I won't say that necessarily that I'm woke, but I'm a little bit more in tune with some of the nuances to what you should look for, and not simply GPA and institution only as factors when considering someone to either be admitted to an institution or for a job.
Right.
And so I think it's important that everyone, and so you only have a 2.8 and I have a 4.0. And so I would argue that your experiences and the adversity that you had to go through with all of what I just described, and probably more, probably makes you a better fit than the privileged white person who had everything handed to them on a silver spoon who went to Harvard. And it's not to say that there aren't amazingly gifted, thoughtful, empathetic, nurturing people that go to Ivy League schools.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think it's important that you understand that the person of color who went to Monmouth or an HBC who had a 2.8, there's more to the story. So don't always just look at the numbers.
Yeah, this is the thing. It definitely teaches you how to be a leader, if anything. Because where I'm from, I'm always honest about it. Me and my boys, we from the hood,
Yeah.
We saw a lot. We had to learn a lot on our own, a lot of survival. The first thing my mom told me when my grandfather died, I was 11 years old. She said, "You're the man of the house now." And, thinking back on it, I'm like, well, that's not something you're probably supposed to tell an 11-year-old kid. But my whole thing is, okay, this is my family. I'm trusting of what they're saying. And, I got to figure out how to make this work for everybody, And, I tell people all the time that I grew up young. I experienced a lot. I've seen a lot at a very early age. And so, truth be told, most of the things that y'all deal with that are problems relative, I'm like, what's that?
Yeah.
Oh, you got to go to work. You don't like your job. So you want to, you want to just work, 2 hours instead of 5, because you say, oh, life is over if you can't get reduced hours. I'm like, I'm just saying, I'm not saying that's an actual thing, but relatively speaking, is like,
yeah, comparatively.
what's up with that? Yeah. You don't know how to leverage. Like, say, if you want to be somebody who's working a job, but you want to build your own business, you don't want to leverage what you have until you get to where you're trying to be. Those are things that you learn. Just my grandparents only had an 8th grade education, and again, this is a long time ago, but they bought their own land. They built their own house. They had a garden where people from the community would come and get produce. We had a little chicken farm, 3 roosters, 2 hens.
Wow.
We would get the eggs. These are things that my grandfather taught me about gardening. To this day, in my yard, I have 5 fruit trees that I take care of.
Wow.
Since I learned from him as a kid, And so I just see life differently. I'm turning 40 in less than 2 weeks.
That's right.
But many people say, oh, man, you got the wisdom of an 80-year-old, 70-year-old. I was like, well, I had to learn a lot real fast. And so, again, all of those tools, taught me all the things that I needed to know to be in this position that I am in today. And There have been hardships
Mm.
that I still think about. But a lot of the toughness also built me for this platform, to be a leader, to be a change maker. And that's the way I see it.
Yeah, let's get into a little bit of that. I appreciate your transparency. And do you get pushback as a college professor with tenure at Loyola Marymount University, or not as much? Or
No, not at all. Actually, to be honest with you, my experience here has been great. I actually earned early tenure, so I got tenure a year before I was supposed to.
Hell yeah.
And that's because I've been producing, I've been putting out the work. They love the work. They spread the work on their social platforms all the time. So it's been good.
Shout out to Loyola Marymount, Los
Yeah,
Angeles.
for sure.
Let's go. So I'm going to get into this question first. I didn't have an
All right.
order of anything because I was getting hot on the airplane just thinking about it, because I posted about this and I got the most pushback on LinkedIn yesterday, which
Wow.
I did not expect, because the pushback that I get, whether I talk about Jane Elliott or anything else, the Jane Elliott video has gotten almost 800,000 views, and it took who knows why. But anyways, so I posted yesterday that Tom Brady, for the second time when he announced his retirement, did so on the first day of Black History Month. And I don't know why that shit had me so hot, but I was like, man, of all the days. Now, I got a couple things that I want to say about this. You can jump in anytime or cut me off or whatever.
Absolutely.
It's no problem. Interject. But I used to love watching Tom. But after 2020, something happened. And he's not alone. It's Aaron Rodgers, it's Peyton Manning, it's Eli Manning, it's Tony Romo, and Troy Aikman. Because those, to me, are the biggest white influencers in sports.
Yeah.
Hands down. We could talk about Rex Chapman. We can talk about JJ Redick. We can talk about Popovich. We can talk about Steve Kerr and all the guys that are the most outspoken in the second most popular sport in America, which is basketball. And I got a lot of pushback on LinkedIn yesterday about, oh, well, it's nothing. And it's just Tom talking about, it's not nothing to me. And it's not about me. It's about social injustice, and it's about how you use your platform and what side of history I think it's important that you're on. Now, I've said this before, you don't have to say anything as a pro athlete. You don't. But I can't for the life of me understand with the recent murder of Tyree Nichols, and since George Floyd, obviously in 2020. So I went back on Tom's social media just to use him as an example.
Right.
He only posted 3 times, if my research is correct, between Twitter and Instagram, and that was in 2020, right when George Floyd was murdered. And Tom has not talked about social injustice or systemic racism or any of the situations that have happened since then. And all he's talked about are him and his relationship with Gronk, his clothing line, his fucking marriage, his retirement twice.
Yeah.
Like, are you fucking kidding me? Now, there's a lot of pushback from professional athletes that I've had on the show. Andre Rison, who was on the show, said Tom's made a lot of black people a lot of money, and he doesn't have to say anything. And Drew Henson, who played with him at Michigan,
Right.
has said, you know what? You're the only person that's ever asked me that question except my wife. Like, why doesn't Tom speak up? And so, anyways, I just want to know your opinion. Do you feel, because this is something that obviously this is a huge white issue. Whites run unions, whites run Congress, whites run sports. This country was founded by whites for whites in every aspect of that space.
Yeah.
There are still 5 states with slavery literally in the books. And so we're nowhere near as where we need to be. Are there better opportunities for people of color? Yes. But there's still so many issues. So what are your thoughts about those white guys in the NFL, especially Tom Brady, who's now retired, who never, since George Floyd, spoke up about one thing except his own selfish narrative. I've gone off worse before. I tried to keep it, stay level headed about it, but it's just, man, maybe I'm just being overly critical of him, but it's just frustrating. And it's not just him, right? I just mentioned all those names. None of those guys do one thing. Like, are we going to see it during the Super Bowl? Like, one thing about it? Are they going to come together as a collective and say, we got to change things, especially after Tyree Nichols? Like these guys don't say anything.
Yeah. Two things. So to that question, and then to Black History Month in and of itself. On the stop Black History Month. In speaking about him announcing second retirement on the first day, it speaks to the criticisms of Black History Month in the first place, being the shortest month of the year, whether it's a leap year or not. And things being relegated to that month, and then beyond that, it's a bunch of lip service to what's going to be done for Black people in the country. And then after that, we move on to the next movement. We see the next person being killed by police, and woe is me, kumbaya, right? And so to have that, with the understanding that is the ebb and flow of Black History Month, it can spark some anger among a lot of people. But then back to your point of what you were talking about, like with Audrey Rising and others, it's that kind of speaks to this connection, right? That no matter what you do, if it doesn't get the whites' approval, then it's not going to happen. Let's even look at it from a different perspective too, like the Oscars are white. Whereas on one side of the argument, the Oscars need to become more diverse. But then some Black people saying, well, why is that your standard? Why can't you build something on your own like we've been doing? Mm-hmm. So I think as long as we have a non-Black owner in the NFL, for example, we're going to keep singing that same tune. That's where the system aspect of it has to change.
But Tom was working for Tampa Bay with one of the most diverse staffs in the history of sports. And he still didn't say anything after winning a Super Bowl. Like, how is your brand going to be affected by that? You're Tom Brady.
Right. And I think the thing with him is, I think it's common knowledge where his political leanings lie.
Right. He has a MAGA hat in his locker. We all know that.
And so, for him, and that's the thing, right? Because when the Black Lives Matter movement started, we started seeing pushback that, hey, you're trying to say that Black people are better than everyone else. Well, it's not the case. It's just that we want to be
Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, that's simple. As simple as that. And so I believe that with the uprising of let's make this country great again. Let's bring things back to the way that they were. In his case, he may see that as, oh, okay, well, I have backup if I don't want to say anything relative to the needs of Black people, right? That's the whole thing. That's the whole not blue lives, but that's Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter that has countered the movement in and of itself. And so I think that's why we are seeing that Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, the others, being at a point to say, well, I'm not going to say anything. Whether I agree with this movement or not, I'm not going to say anything because I don't know who's going to come after me. And that's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. So I've had two members of the 1968 Olympic track and field team on the show, Mel Penders and Lou Scott.
Yeah.
And it was you probably know this better than I do, but it was a collective agreement amongst the team, even though those two, John Smith and John Carlos and Tommy Smith, were the two that, along with the Australian, that ended up protesting.
Yeah.
And so I want to sort of go to the middle of it,
Okay.
because one of the questions I have is there was protests, and you were on a committee that talked about this type of thing. If my memory serves me correctly, when I was doing some research. So can you talk about your experience with that? And do you think the 2020 Olympics is going to go down as one of those Olympics that will look back in 50 years the way that we look at 68 and the protests?
You know, let's take it to the 68 and then come to that particular committee issue. So that was the Olympics human rights,
Right.
back in 68.
Mhm.
And for me in my book, so my book is of course the title, The Black Athlete Revolt, the Sport Justice Movement in the Age of Black Lives Matter. But prior to the 68 Olympics, we had Dr. Harry Edwards, champion, basically the father of sports sociology, write his book, The Revolt of the Black Athlete, which came out a year or two after the protests. And so this title of my book is in many ways an homage to him. But he was one of the architects of the 68 protests, right? And so
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so the main agenda of the 68 protests were to wage a war against the US for treating Muhammad Ali badly. Right. And so we saw the Black Power fist, famous, but we also saw that they wear shoes on the podium. So they talked about a plethora of things that they were protesting, homelessness, all those things. So when we saw now 2020 come about, this is on the heels of the dormancy of people like Michael Jordan and others who were not as politically focused. But now you have several high-profile athletes, men and women, who said, okay, we saw what happened to Kaepernick in 2016. We're seeing where our country is going as far as all of these movements. So the time is now. Social media plays a role there too. We can see all types of information that's spread out here in the Twitterverse, right? I think I saw a meme where it says Twitter has become the cesspool of our society in many ways.
Well, and then you could add Tiger Woods to that. And then also, just so people know, contextually, typically in the Olympics, you're not allowed to protest anything political. Otherwise, you could be banned from the Olympics. So just so people know that going into it. But in 2020, there was some things that changed. So that's why I asked the question, do you think in 50 years or even 20 years, we'll see the kind of attention given to what they did, the way that we're giving, really in the last 5 years, the attention that we gave to the 68 Olympics and all those people that protested?
I'm of the mindset that it's going to happen. So speaking of the most recent Olympics, we saw Simone Biles and her situation, and that brought about further conversations on athletes and mental health.
Sure.
In addition to all of the protests and the Black Lives Matter salutes that were there, I think organizations can't help but to change because of the way that society influences their dollars. Right? Nike couldn't help but to make a commercial with Kaepernick after a while.
Yeah.
The NFL couldn't help but to create the Inspired Change initiative. The Olympics, I mean, prior to these games, there were a host of athletes, professors, including me and others, at least 300 people from across the globe, who sent in a petition to the Olympics through the Muhammad Ali Foundation, to urge them not to stop athletes from protesting. And so we saw some protests there, and they couldn't really do anything about it because look at the movements that are out here right now. So Have we seen some progress, like you mentioned? Yes, not nearly where we need to be, but I think 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the road, we'll see some substantial change, but not right now because there's so many people fighting back against all of this stuff.
I wish it wouldn't take that long,
Yeah.
but that's typically how it is when you have a system in place that's got a 500-year head start.
Yes.
Um, so to that point, we had fast forward a little bit from 68 or a lot. And then again, you can interject any of the athletes and for those of you that haven't read the book, check out the Black Athlete Revolt. It's coming out on the 8th, and it's an incredible read. And for those of you that are looking for a higher vibration to learn more about what we should do next to make things more equitable and to be more anti-racist, which means all you have to do is be conscious and deliberate every day. Just be conscious and deliberate every day. That could mean that you share a post that resonates with you, that educates people. You could duet something. You could stitch something on social media. You could like something, anything that changes the vibration that helps others see that you're being more conscious and deliberate. And then there's a ripple effect there with white people. We saw since George Floyd, from my perspective, more white allies.
Yeah.
And so, then we had the bubble and the wobble and a lot of social injustice in those two things during the pandemic. So what are your thoughts where we are since the pandemic started 3 years later, which there's a lot of things that were disproportionate again to the Black and brown community that we could talk about, but are we going in the right direction in sports? Or is it as simple as what I talked about earlier with the white influencers need to do more to keep the conversation going? Because I get a lot of people that tell me what you're doing isn't helping. You're just pitting people against each other. And so maybe I am. That's not my intention. My intention is to be a vessel and a bridge to mobilize and to help educate the best that I can about some of these issues and the nuances that I've learned from people that have come on the show to be more conscious and deliberate so that there's more allies and more opportunities for people of color. So are we moving in the right direction with all your suggestions that you talk about at the end of your book?
To some degree, we have the NBA. Out of all of the big leagues that are in this country specifically, you have the NBA who was a little bit more willing. You have a commissioner that's a little bit more willing to sit with the athletes and listen to them. We talked about the bubble, for example, when the players or I think it's Philando Castillo, in Milwaukee. And when the Milwaukee Bucks are in the bubble, they were like, okay, we don't want to play. And so Adam Silver was like, okay, well, let's sit down and talk about this. What can we do? What should we do now to help you and then do things later? So, we have the NBA who was more willing to talk about that stuff. You have then on the other side, the NFL, NASCAR, NHL was still struggling. They put these initiatives together. Well, it's like watching a toddler throw their little bowl of spaghetti against the wall, and some stick, some don't. That's the way that those initiatives to bring about social change are happening at this point. So there's some slow progress. But what we need to see and what we need to continue to push for is actually look at what these sport organizations are donating to, in addition to these initiatives. You have the NFL, others who donate to causes that are in direct opposition to Black Lives Matter or direct opposition to, proper housing for people who want to leave Section 8 to, buy their own place. Because I own a home in Los Angeles. I feel great about that. But, I needed a lot of help along the way. And a lot of other people do. And so we're making some progress. The other thing that needs to happen, though, in order to, again, see this through, is that these athletes need to continue to push the leagues themselves to be better. Athletes have a lot of power now, a lot of influence. And even in the equity and inclusion space, we need to get away from the token of let's just hire this Black person to being at a point of being conscious enough to retain these people. But you hire them, they come into the space, they fix all the vitriol,
Right.
and then they leave. Then what? There's nothing. So those are some of the things that I think we need to really solidify in these movements in order to see that progression even further.
Yeah, I sort of equated it to when Lance Armstrong was raising money for cancer, and he raised whatever hundreds of millions of dollars. Then he was busted for, doping,
Mm-hmm.
and then Livestrong went away. But Livestrong should have transcended, the cancer research should have transcended him being caught for doping. And so that's what I feel like is happening now with Black Lives Matter. It's an opportunity to criticize the founders of Black Lives Matter when that was just a vehicle to talk about Black Lives Mattering.
Yeah.
Because that's really what it's about. And it did its job. Even if people are going to be critical, deservedly so, for some of the things that have happened.
Absolutely.
With the organization itself.
Mm-hmm.
So anything else in that vein with regards to athletes, or the thing that I thought about also was social media, because the one thing that organizations who have changed the names of their mascots, or Dan Snyder, or there's a lot of examples from Donald Sterling, until now, which Donald Sterling situation with the LA Clippers probably started a lot of this. Athletes being more outspoken and such. But social media is very powerful, and that's the one thing that can really drive a change, like with what we saw during the 50th anniversary of Title IX and the NCAA, and the women not having an equal weight room. That's just one example, but that is a very powerful thing. Within 24 hours, there were weights in that women's facility. And that's the power of social media. And so how do you use social media, or encourage your students to use social media in a way where, because social media can prevent someone from getting a scholarship.
Okay.
You can lose a scholarship,
Absolutely.
but you can also make change, like with Keith Lee and his food reviews on TikTok, and how he has got 20 million followers now because he helped one white small business in Las Vegas who was struggling, and is now like a social media hit.
Yeah.
So that's the power of it.
Yeah. We take a look at it, right? Even in the title of my book, we talk about hashtag Black Lives Matter. And we think, believe it or not, we're in the year where it's been 10 years since that hashtag was created.
Amazing.
And like you said, it hasn't been, at least from the organizational perspective, it hasn't been a perfect one.
Right.
We know all the things that have transpired, but the movement of itself, in and of itself, is important. And when I talk to student athletes, when I talk to, because actually in the book, I was able to talk to the captain of the women's soccer team at USC. And the university began a Black Lives Matter student athlete coalition. And it was supported by the director of athletics. They even hired someone to run it. And the students themselves were heavily involved. And so I always tell them, if you want to put something out about a certain situation, like because, first of all, make sure it's a credible source.
Right.
Because you don't want to just share anything for sharing's sake, because we see that a lot. I think, particularly with Twitter, now that people can buy the blue check,
Right.
that muddies things some. But be sure that connect with the grassroots organization that has been doing the work in the communities for the longest. I was able to talk to the Vera Institute of Social Justice out of New York, their president, about the things that they've done in collaboration with athletes and they talk about criminal justice reform, and several athletes have come to that door asking and seeking. And so that is major progress there, so they're trying to become informed before they speak. So that's the thing that I would suggest. But like you say, social media can make or break you.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that I really push. I push them to understand the power that they have with it. And I teach them about how you can lose that same power in one tweet. And you have to figure out how to tilt that line.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so for those of you, again, who haven't read the book, is it going to be on Audible at some point?
We're working on that.
Yeah.
But right now it's pretty much
In print form. Yeah. So that's cool. Yeah. And so he goes, Dr. Anderson goes into the history of all the Black influencers, from Althea Gibson to Arthur Ashe, everyone before and everyone after, to Muhammad Ali, obviously, and Jim Brown. So I encourage you to it's an amazing education. And there were some that I had no idea about, truly amazing. And some of the people that you actually interviews that are on some of these committees, diversity committees, and that deal with the intersection that we're trying to deal with on this show, because that's so important to have a more holistic approach towards this. I think you need to compartmentalize it sometimes, but it is about the big picture and how everything is related, and so, all right, let's get to the rapid fire, and there'll probably be some great answers that have to do with still some of the stuff that maybe you wanted to touch on before we end the show. So can you explain what it was like when Loyola Marymount recently, where you teach, right? You have tenure, you had early tenure. I like to mention that as many times as we can. When they recently beat Gonzaga in men's basketball this year, like what was it like on campus? Like, do people care about, sports there? Like, obviously it's not Duke in terms of men's basketball, but what was it like? Was there a buzz after LMU beat Gonzaga a couple weeks
we
ago?
saw about double the amount of students at the next game.
Right.
And the student affairs of BP was out, all on Twitter. Oh, look at our support. Look at everything that's going on here. Of course, it's a big Hank Gatherers
right.
Acknowledgement on campus, and they have the statue and all of that. But sports is not that big, but of course, that made the exception.
Yeah, shout out to Stan Johnson. I mean, he's a gentleman of color. And for Loyola Marymount at this point in the season to be over 500, way over 500. Look, there's a lot of good men's basketball, women's basketball in Los Angeles. Obviously, USC and UCLA at the forefront. And for them to be doing what they're doing at very little known intercollegiately, Loyola Marymount, other than probably Hank Gathers and Paul Westhead and Bo Kimball from back in the 90s, man, it would be a great story if they won the conference tournament somehow and made it to the NCAA tournament and they were dancing.
Yeah, I know, right? We'll
wow.
have the same, media exposure like that sister institution at Loyola Chicago, remember?
That's right.
Years ago.
Wow. And the sister, I forgot her name, but the woman who, the whatever her title is, she was like 90-something years old. Right. Yeah.
At the games.
At the games. And she had so much visibility. Okay. So your all-time favorite athlete is Muhammad Ali.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Not even close. So who's your second?
Second would be perhaps I think Serena.
Serena Williams?
Yeah. She is, just dominant. Where they came from, how they finally helped them get to where they are.
Yeah.
Her career is like unmatched.
Yeah. Shout out to Serena and Venus and mom and dad too, and the rest of the family. Like they all were a part of it. Yeah. So can you tell everyone what it's like to attend not only an HBC football game, but what it's like at halftime?
It's funny. I went to the game. Me and my homie, who's also from Arkansas, he lives out here. We went to the game earlier this college football season. It was UCLA versus Alabama State University, HBCU. Mm-hmm. And I was laughing because halftime, Alabama State came to perform. And so I said, man, these people don't know what they're about to do. And it's an amazing, I mean, you're talking about
Man.
the music that they play, the dancing,
Man,
the choreography,
for real.
name it. It's just a hell of an experience. It's you have to see it in order to get it.
Man, it's on my bucket list. And the closest thing that I've ever experienced is when I was scouting as a college basketball coach. I went to Lincoln University,
Okay, yeah.
and it was just a basketball game.
Uh-huh.
Man, the
It was lit,
crowd,
wasn't it?
it was so lit. They were going off on the white ref. Like
Yeah.
they any chance they had to stand up and lose their mind, like it was an unbelievable experience. It was phenomenal. Man, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so the book Just Mercy, and the movie obviously, but the book really moved me, like to tears. I had to put it down several times. So besides your book, which we want everyone to read, what are 3 books that you think could alter white people's consciousness thoughtfully while educating and challenging them?
Yeah. I think about a couple of them. I actually have them on my desk here that I plan on reading sometime this semester. I have Jamel Hill's Uphill.
I read it.
I think Stephen A. Smith's Straight Shooter, particularly because Stephen A. is essentially the face of ESPN, right? And he talks about, well, not a lot of people can go and be a Tom Brady or LeBron James, but you can be me. And I get where he was coming from, because not everybody's going to be a professional athlete. Right. And I'm thinking about Ben Crump's open season. He's taken a lot of cases over his career, and the way he just explains the system is just phenomenal.
And for those of you that don't follow him on social media, you should just search Attorney Crump on Instagram, for example, and the stuff that he and his team post daily it's hard to watch. I got to be honest with you. I look at it every day. It comes up on my feed, but I watch it because I just feel like I have a responsibility to educate myself on some of these things that I can't even imagine are still going on. So I appreciate those suggestions. So we talked about Major League Baseball earlier. Less than 10% of African Americans. And some guests I've had have suggested it's because there are so few scholarships in college for baseball players. And other sports are more attractive. Do you feel like Rob Manfred is doing a good job as a commissioner with Major League Baseball, or does Ken Griffey Jr. need to be the commissioner?
I think we need Ken Griffey to come in there. I mean, the swing is certainly the best thing that's happening there, right? I think baseball is an old boys institution that can't shake its ways. Okay, and we're talking about from the first commissioner, Mountain Landis, who held the common law statement of blacks shouldn't be in baseball. I think some of that has trickled down to today. I'm not saying that Rob Manfred is just doing an absolute horrible job. I mean, at least he's talking about it to some degree, but talking can only get you so far if you are trying to make a statement. Because in one of my papers, he said with the game of Jackie Robinson and Roberto Clemente, we need to make this game more representative of them. Great. Sounds good. They have several programs that they try to introduce baseball to in the inner cities. The research that I did on it shows that they don't even have a understanding of what's successful with these programs. So again, good words, but those actions have to follow. So it's okay. He's doing okay, but it could be better.
Yeah. Tell me one word that comes to mind with regards to the following people.
Okay.
Or 2 words. I know it's going to be hard for some of these people to just say one word, but
okay.
Nelson Mandela.
Leader.
Yeah. Colin Kaepernick.
Visionary.
Steve Kerr.
Assistant champion.
Jerry Jones.
Typical.
Do you believe him with regards to that 1957 photo?
No. It's hard to.
Yeah. Especially when he's never hired a black coach.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck out of here. We mentioned MJ and Tiger. Let's go MJ first.
Icon. Tiger.
Disappointed?
That could be a word.
Similar with what I feel, how I feel about Tom. But more disappointed in Tom because it's not up to the Chris Pauls and the LeBron James and the people in the Black and brown community to do the majority of speaking about this issue. It's about whites educating themselves and being better allies, and then converting that into actual change.
Yeah.
And it's not supposed to be easy. Like, what the fuck? Tyree Nichols.
The latest.
George Floyd.
The spark.
January 6th.
What's new?
Speaking of apologies that were never given, and we talked a little bit about in the beginning of whiteballing, and tomorrow Stand comes out, directed by Jocelyn Rose Lyons, produced by Showtime Entertainment. They've never apologized publicly to a lot of people, but especially Mahmoud Abdul Rauf for what happened to him. And you do talk about him, the former Chris Jackson. Do you have any thoughts about Adam Silver, why it's taken so long for him to publicly apologize? And now it's going to look like he's going to apologize, if he does, because of the documentary, which is unfortunate. Like, why is it so hard to apologize for being whiteballed, which he clearly was, because when he went on HBO back in the day, he was misrepresented and mischaracterized after 9/11 because he was Muslim, for, possibly being a part of the narrative that, Islamophobia, et cetera, is the reason why we had 9/11. So your thoughts about Mahmoud and why Adam Silver hasn't apologized yet, and do you think he will?
Again, I think you hit it on the head. He will have to at this point, right? Because sports are very reactionary. There's no standard for the concussion. They tried to hide it, the NFL, for example, as much as they could before they couldn't. And with Mahmoud, people think that it's of course Kaepernick who went against the anthem, went against the nation, but it was Mahmoud who did this in a time where athletes just forgot about activism altogether, where he stood against a country that he felt was still vilifying Black folk. And
this was right after Rodney King, not long after Rodney King.
Right. So you're talking about just 30 years ago, if that. And you also talked about where a society was not holding the NBA and others accountable, because why should we? Right? There's nobody calling us out. But that shows the shift, right? Now on how society can make organizations move, whereas 40 years ago, an organization could do what it would want to do, cover it up and shit is the fans or whatever. But now, Adam Silver, with the power of social media, with the power of athletes, becoming their own brands and building their own businesses outside of the game and speaking out on these issues, you have to say something as the leader of this league.
Yeah, but see, that's the whole point, right? Everyone that came before all these people, you can sort of wrap your head around a 1957 photo during segregation where someone's there. But what have you done since 2016, Jerry Jones? Like, you can wrap your head around before 2016. But what is your excuse after 2020 for sure, Tom?
Yeah.
Like it's encouraged now that you speak out on many levels. You're not going to be blackballed. You're not going to be whiteballed, because they can't do it in the same way where they could have before. So what's your excuse?
Yeah.
Like, even if you could wrap your head around it before, like, what the fuck? Like, are you serious?
I'm quite sure he's not going to lose that over $300 million broadcasting contract that he's probably going to signed, but he has that right there in his pocket, the day after he announced the retirement. So you're not going to lose that if you were to say that, oh, okay, we need to treat Black people better. You're right about that. But you know what? Again, that speaks to the road ahead, right? Where the challenge is now we are into the bushes of protests, and we've been doing that. We've been talking about that, but systemic change, policy reform, pushing for those things are the next, and it's going to take all of us to do it. Like you say, I cannot watch another Black person being killed at the hands of the police, even with the Tyree Nichols situation being, something of an anomaly in the case of past police brutality issues. But again, that speaks more towards the system than the people. And so those are the things that we need to see. And until we have that true allyship, not allyship of lip service, but allyship of true support, come with me. Let's do this together. Let's build, let's talk, let's tear down, let's rebuild. We're going to continue to be in circles with this.
And the way you do that, yeah, it is. And the way that you do that, you have to have opportunity and resources.
Yes.
And one of the ways that you get there, and that's for anyone, but especially for people of color who have not had opportunity and resources. But because of people like Dr. Richard Lapchick, who has championed civil rights and opportunities and who does his reports annually, he's bringing receipts.
Yes.
And so you cannot gaslight, which is what you talked about earlier about that professor deleting you from social media because he was gaslighting you and creating a false narrative, which is what I see all the time. But when you have a white influencer behind the scenes, one of the 100 most influential people in the history of sports, producing a document, presenting receipts that people can see, it's inarguable. It allows for more seats at the table, and it allows for opportunity and resources.
Yeah.
And so that is exactly what we need, in addition to white allies being more anti-racist once you get educated on certain issues like this, because then you can become more conscious and deliberate, and you'll open your eyes and see things with a different lens, with a different sense of clarity, and you won't have as many blind spots.
There you go.
So we have 2 Black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Do you have a prediction?
I see Philly winning. Of course, if Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs pull it out, that cements his legacy even more. It certainly cements his $500 million contract. But I see the Eagles as the most complete team.
Absolutely.
Jalen Hurts, a remarkable story, right?
Wow.
Has full command of that offense. The defense is playing its mind out. It could be a close game, but I see the Eagles getting a second.
Well, if Mahomes can pull off a few more no-look passes, then they might have a chance. Okay, a couple more questions. Yeah. I have zero tolerance as a professor for blank.
Disrespect.
Have you had to confront someone and redirect them, and then they were like, "Wow, I didn't even realize I was being disrespectful," and I appreciate you helping me understand that better?
Fortunately, no.
Okay.
Not by any students, not by any other staff or faculty members. But again, my West Virginia experience is different.
Absolutely. Is there any misunderstandings about your work that you think people should know about going into this whole self-reflection and seeking a greater understanding of what we're talking about today?
Yeah. So, the work here is not to be, it's to be solution-based, not to sit here and say, oh, I'm a Black man that hates white people, blah, blah, blah. That's why I'm writing this book, because that's the narrative of many people who are trying to do this work.
Right.
But it's to actually challenge and to help people comprehend these experiences. You know what I'm saying? I talk to people all the time. I'm willing to bet not a lot of Black people want to sit and talk about the issues of race and racism all the time. They just want to get up and go to work.
Fucking exhausting. It's exhausting,
like
man.
Everybody else,
God,
but when these things come up, you can't help but to express your frustration. And so this book, my work, everything is bringing out the facts and talking about what we had to experience, where we are, and where we're trying to go. And we live in a day where titles of articles and the headlines are the only thing that people read and they make their conclusions. I just say, give it an opportunity and then ask me questions from there.
So if you could have any 5 people at your dinner table, past or present, dead or alive, but you've never met them before, who would be at your dinner table?
Aaliyah.
Yep.
Aaliyah, she was one of my favorite artists.
Yep.
I would love to pick the brain of MLK, Malcolm X.
People misunderstand MLK. I mean, obviously he didn't have a very good approval rating when he was alive, and obviously it's more now. But do people have a misunderstanding about him at all, do you think? Your research?
I think in many ways, because people like to say, what would Dr. King do? Like when we see these protests and all this stuff. But he would say, protests are for the people who, of course, who were unheard. He was assassinated over labor rights and unions. And he was fighting for these things that we're talking about today. So I think people just like to pick what makes them feel good and take that and go from there. I think Paul Robeson is definitely a person I would probably spend the most time with, because this man was in his day, what they consider the valedictorian at Rutgers University in the early 1900s, a Black man who also excelled in football. He was in the theater. He earned a law degree from Columbia University.
Amazing.
And went on to have a storied career in the theater, because they did not give him a law position because of Jim Crow.
Right.
And was ultimately ostracized and pretty much, died a hermit because of what he spoke out against. But he was also one of the chief influencers of the civil rights movement, right? And let's see, one other person. I have to sit with my man Samuel L. Jackson. It's my favorite actor.
Wow.
I just got like, man, how did you get into these roles? Let's talk about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh man, what an honor. Anything else that we didn't get to that you think is important with regards to your book, or just in general moving forward, that you think you want to tell people? We've been in almost 40 countries, and we really enjoy these kind of conversations. Hopefully people got some value out of it.
Yeah, just a couple of things relative to the book. Of course, I think you've mentioned it before, but say it again. It will be out on February 8th. You can get it, pre-order it now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold, or my website, ShaunMarkAnderson.com. And one other thing about the travel that you just mentioned, in 2016, I went to Accra, Ghana. And then I was fortunate enough to go to the slave castles that were there. And I went through this thing called the Door of No Return, where when the slaves were loaded up into the boats, they would go out through this door on to the boats, never to see home again. Well, at this particular Ghanaian museum, for all of the people whose ancestors came across on the boats, for those people who visited Africa, you would walk back through that same door, and they would call it the Door of Return, to welcome you as the relative to those people that were lost. And that right there changed my entire life.
Wow.
It changed the way that I approach things. It changed the way that I saw society. It made me more bold in my understanding and pursuits. It was one of the best things to ever happen to me. And that was the catalyst to a lot of the stuff that I do now. Man.
Again, flowers to you, man. That's incredible.
Appreciate it.
Well, your work, your journey, your story, man. I mean, it's probably a blur on some level, right? You probably just look back and you're like, man, my childhood, and then, all the stuff we talked about today, and then where you are now, like from a representation standpoint to, what your life's work now? And so where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In 5 years, I actually see myself being one of those TED speakers, going even further across the globe, talking about these issues, actually going to the different sport leagues, the IOC, FIFA, NBA, and actually building out plans that will help change the globe in a positive way, help change the world in a positive way.
Whether it's the Bill Russell rule across the board in college or diversity, equity, inclusion from an educational perspective. Absolutely. Man, fascinating stuff. And maybe one of those stops where you do a speech will be West Virginia University. Now,
there you go. Full circle.
Full circle. All right. Well, hey, let's stay in touch. Anything I can do always to be a bridge or a vessel to help you from a connectivity standpoint or anything else, please do not hesitate to ask. Mad love and props to you for your journey. Much respect for what you've had to endure and what you're doing now on so many levels and so many layers. And can't thank you enough for coming into the Sports Deli, where everyone deserves a seat at the table, especially Professor Dr. Shaun Anderson from Loyola Marymount University, author of The Black Athlete Revolt. Man, can't thank you enough, man.
No, like, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, truly much love and respect, man.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for support.
All right, we'll talk soon.
All right.
All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Shaun Anderson from Loyola Marymount University, author of The Black Athlete Revolt, and enjoyed today's outtakes, ladies and gentlemen, because they were good.
All right, how's it going?
Hey, Dr. A in the house.
How's it going?
Good, man.
Yeah, I hear you.
You busy today? You teach?
Yeah, I just finished teaching about 15 minutes ago. So, but I'm good to go.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. Yeah, man, literally, you know how things can go when you travel.
Yeah.
And, because I was there and I came back and I had to go feed the cat because I'm cat sitting, this whole thing. So I was like, man, I changed my vibration this year from the standpoint of I tried to put it out into the universe that, for the first 3 seasons of the show, when you're building something, you got to reach out to a lot of people.
Right.
And so I was hoping that this year some people would reach out to me, which who knows why that kind of thing happens if you put it out into the universe kind of thing, right? Sure. But yeah, it's been interesting. The director of Stand, which as you know comes out tomorrow, chronicling Mahmoud, whose shirt I'm wearing.
Yeah.
The director, her agent contacted me and wants to come on, stuff like that. And it's really just more being a vessel and a bridge.
Sure.
Not to pump up the show, selfish plug once in a while. You know what I mean? But it's just
absolutely.
It's interesting how that's worked out. And it's not to say that I'm not going to reach out to people, because we have these so many intersections. We have to, the spirit of what I'm talking about is important.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm with you with that.
It still sounds like you're in an echo chamber. So you can take your time. See, these outtakes, this is why we do outtakes, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the show. For this type of thing right here, like when I had Dr. Kennedy on, he's a trauma specialist, right?
Okay.
On my other podcast, his power went out 4 times.
Oh.
It was so funny. I literally was like trying to be a stand-up comedian. I failed miserably, but it was great. It was phenomenal content. Yeah. So yeah, you can take your time. But yeah, anyways, so yeah, everything's going well, and I'm excited for Stand tomorrow. For those of you listening to this, Stand has already come out, because we'll probably get this up tomorrow, and that is chronicling Mahmoud Abdul Rauf's whiteballing by the NBA, which we'll probably talk a little bit about today, conceptually, if nothing else. So, did you go to the volume option?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. And
because you got a legit mic there, like that's a serious mic. Like I'm
trying to get it to work properly, but it keeps.
That's the gold standard right there. Man,
I thought it was set up properly at first, but give me a second.
Compliments of Loyola Marymount, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
Hey, you might take
Gotta
full
give us
advantage of
something.
that. Right. Got to get something out of it. Yeah, it's weird, right? And and for the record, I've tried Yetis, and these gaming headphones are the ones that sound the best every time. I don't know why, but this is a second gaming. These are Bluetooth. I got the old school mic here too, obviously, but trust me, we've had more technical issues with me with like, Bluetooth could go out, the Wi-Fi could go out. There's in the age of Zoom. And for those of you just listening into these outtakes and you're not watching, over Dr. Anderson's right shoulder, he has a poster of the Black Athlete Revolt, his incredible book that I just finished today on the airplane. And man, it was an incredible read. I listened to part of it because I used my screen reader while I did a number of things, walking and exercising, and then I actually read the rest of the last 50 pages today on the plane. So I encourage you guys to check that out. Is it out yet officially?
It actually comes out on the 8th.
On the 8th, right.
Yes.
For those of you listening, after February 8th, 2023, it's already out. For those of you listening between today and February 8th, it'll be out on February 8th.
Yeah. Is it still echoing?
It is, but we can rock and roll, man. It's all good. Unless you want to restart the computer one time to give that a whirl, and then if it's still the same, then we can do it.
Which do you prefer?
It's your call, man. If you think that might trigger it, you went into the settings of the computer and on Zoom. You did both.
Yeah. So
Weird.
I've connected the mic to the laptop, but every time it shows up and then it disappears as an option. So I don't know if it's like a.
So even on the
Zoom,
on the Zoom option where it says mute, you went in there and chose it?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's up to you. You want to restart it? It only takes 2 minutes, right? Just to restart and come back, or we can hit it.
Yeah, let me try to do that, and I'm gonna hop right back onto this link.
Bet.
Okay.
Has come and gone. We are trying to see if the audio. You guys ever hear me beatbox? What's goody? Let's see what's good in the news today. If you guys are listening to this, maybe 5-10 years down the road, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf was on ESPN talking to Jalen Rose, as well as Stephen A. Smith. Obviously, we have 2 black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl for the first time ever, in Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes. So I think that's incredible. Ooh, I have to add that to the question.
Okay, I don't know if they did anything, but I think that's the.
Yeah, it's still the same.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Let me switch real quick.
Yep. Man, I can't wait to start this discussion. The anticipation's killing me.
Oh yeah. Let me do something else real quick. I'm on the wrong camera.
Oh, you got the side angle, you got the back, man. When you're an international speaker, ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens. You got cameras and mics from all over the place. It's amazing.
Give me 1 second.
Oh, yeah, you're good, man. I'm straight. I was listening to an interesting discussion today. Have you ever gone on Clubhouse?
I'm going to sparingly, not recently.
Yeah, they had a really interesting discussion today about, colonialism and virtue signaling and white supremacy and things of that nature, which I'm sure we'll get into. But it's interesting to just pay attention to nuance about how people get triggered, about the actual topics themselves, people being willing to let others correct them when they're wrong.
Right.
And I was probably one of the few white people in that space. So that part was interesting. I almost asked, I almost said, hey, because they said at one point, we all black in here. And I almost said at one point, I'm white, in the chat, how you can get in the chat. And I almost asked like, hey, I'm white. Is it okay if I'm here? Because they made it a public room, but I want to be respectful. If they were like, hey, honestly, like we'd rather have this a safe space for the black and brown community, I'd have been, I'd have quietly left.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I was going to ask you, did you put any questions forward in that group?
No, I did, but they, the chat goes so fast when there's 500 people in a room
Yeah.
But I asked about what about the power of the black dollar, because that's
Yeah.
something that we've discussed on here before. But
Oh yeah, for
uh,
sure.
all right, let's rock and roll, man. I'm gonna
All right, let's do it.
I'm gonna do an intro. Probably take a minute, and then I like to do the intros because I like the reactions. That's a fun part of the show, as well as the rapid fire at the end, which I usually ask some similar questions with the rapid fire, but I got some different ones today.
Okay.
And I don't know, just the whole concept, of what we're going to discuss today just sort of took my head in some different directions today. So hopefully I'm tying it in a way where I'm going to ask questions, but then I want you to sort of interject what athletes, because you chronologically, with your book discussed the evolution of the Black Athlete Revolt, and then obviously offered solutions at the end.
Right.
How we can go to the, next place in, the next 50 years.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where I want to go with it. Because if I try to go down the line and say, hey, what do you think of this person? What do you think? I'd rather talk a little bit deeper and more thoughtfully with regards to the questions that I have. And then you put in who you feel is important for people to understand that they don't necessarily know. Maybe they've already known about this person, or there's a misrepresentation or something of that nature.
Okay.
All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. And without further ado, all right, all right. Appreciate you, bro. Going with my team now. We got a field trip. We're going to scout the second and third place team. We're in first place, so we're excited about that. Yeah.
There you go.
And just if you have any suggestions about future guests, I know you interviewed some amazing people for the book. Let me know if you think they would be good fits.
Okay.
And or anybody else, and anybody else that has been a part of this show that would be good for you for your second book, or an update to your book, or people that you'd like to get in touch with. I'm sure you have your resources to do that, but anything I can do to help, like I said, that's why I'm here, man, just to serve.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you for having this platform, having me share my information, and hopefully it was good stuff.
No, man, it was amazing. I and I love the rapid fire at the end. So I hope, I don't know if you ever had those kind of questions, but, and then any feedback that you ever have from me, you think of things, you're like, hey, if you had just sort of gone in this direction, or I wish you would have, expounded upon this, or, maybe you could ask less questions here, but more here. I like to have feedback to make me a better version of myself too, with regards to the show, because the show is about you. Sort of like the Players Tribune from the white, whatever I am, social and justice, equality, mental health, leadership perspective, and the smaller platform, at least for now. So hopefully, the only reason I ever care about numbers from social media to this kind of thing is if it can reach more people, to educate, especially white people. Man, that would mean a lot.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. I'm with that all the way.
All right, Professor, go grade those papers and get ready for that next lecture. What's the next lecture about?
Next lecture is actually about the civil rights movement and sports. So we talked about Jack Johnson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the students did not know his history. They didn't know Paul Robeson's history. So it was actually great on Tuesday. So next Tuesday, we're going to get into civil rights.
Wow. I go on oftentimes. George Pope has a room on Clubhouse on Monday nights about Malcolm X, and he's been doing it for 2 years. Yeah. And I go in there oftentimes and just educate myself, listen to some of the previous speeches, and have them break it down. It's fascinating stuff. So if anyone's interested, go on. A former NFL player from Detroit, George Pope, on Clubhouse, free social audio app. That Dr. Anderson has gone on himself sometimes. It's been a while, he said, but fascinating app where you can learn and listen to a lot of different people on a lot of different subjects. So on that note, all right, we'll talk soon. Much love, man.
All right, you too.
Appreciate you.
All right.
All right, perfect.
Boy, that was phenomenal. Great job, and much love to everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us. Remember, Black Lives Matter. Stop the bullying. Stop the Asian hate. Contact your local and state politicians for any inequalities, for any individual or any group that's being marginalized. Also, everyone, we want to raise awareness for those individuals that are currently imprisoned for non-violent offenses, in particular those with long-term sentences that are disproportionate, in particular to those people in the Black and brown community. And I want to send a shout out to 40tons.co. 40 Tons is a socially conscious cannabis brand, and they're a social enterprise using the regulated cannabis industry to fight injustice, in particular for cannabis prisoners. So check them out again at 40, the number 4, the number 0, tons, plural, 40tons.co, because what they're doing in the cannabis space and being a socially conscious company is truly incredible, and they have my full support. And also wanted to remind all of you, if you're having a tough time, you can always call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and that number is 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. And now you can call 988. That's it. All you got to do is dial 988 from any phone. And they are available 24/7, 365 days a year. And if you want to follow me on social media or check out other episodes of this amazing Sports Deli podcast or any of my other podcasts, go to my Linktree at Linktree/Mike Hootner. And if you'd like to support us at the Sports Deli, we'd love to have you either make a one-time donation or feel free to make a donation monthly, either 99 cents a month, $4.99 a month, or $9.99 a month. If you have questions about that, send me an email again to thesportsdeli@gmail.com, and I will send you the link on how you can do that. You can also find it at the bottom of every podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Link at the bottom to support the show. Please check out our website at thesportsdelipodcast.com. Make sure that we continue the conversations with regards to 3 strikes and you're out and mandatory minimums, especially people that are in jail for non-violent offenses. So those things need to change. And remember, gents and ladies, please remember to do your monthly self-breast examinations. And remember, guys, this afflicts about 1,500 men annually, with about a third of those resulting in death. So we want to make sure that we do our monthly self-breast examinations, both men and women. And guys, remember to do your self-testicular examinations every month as well. Until next time, remember, it takes a village. I'm Hootie Hoot. This has been a production of Hootie Hoot Productions. Thank you for joining us in the Sports Deli, where everyone deserves a seat at the table. Remember, it takes a village. Much love, everybody.